Uncle Vincent, we need you to sign these papers so we can get access to your bank account and make sure all your bills are being paid properly." My nephew Derek held the documents out to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, while his wife Laura nodded encouragingly from across my kitchen table. I'm Vincent Romano, 77 years old, and that moment taught me the hardest lesson of my life. Sometimes the people who share your blood are the ones most willing to bleed you dry, while strangers become the family that truly protects and loves you. Let me tell you how I discovered that family isn't about genetics or last names, but about who shows up when you need them most, who celebrates your joys and comforts your sorrows, and who sees your worth when others see only opportunity. The betrayal started small, the way these things usually do. After my wife, Rose, died from complications of diabetes, my family began paying more attention to me than they had in years. Suddenly, relatives I rarely heard from were calling regularly, visiting frequently, and expressing deep concern about my ability to manage on my own. My nephew, Derek, my late brother's son, appointed himself as my primary caretaker without asking if I needed or wanted caretaking. Derek was 45, worked in insurance sales, and had always struck me as someone more interested in commission than compassion. But I was grateful for the attention and mistook his sudden interest for genuine family concern. "Uncle Vinny, we're worried about you living alone in this big house," Derek said during one of his increasingly frequent visits. "What if something happens? What if you fall or have a medical emergency?" The house had been Rose's pride and joy, a modest 3-bedroom home we'd bought in 1970 and slowly improved over 50 years of marriage. It held every memory of our life together, and the thought of leaving it felt like abandoning Rose all over again. "Derek, I've been taking care of myself for 77 years. I think I can manage. But, Uncle Vinny, things are different now. You're getting older, and Rose isn't here to help anymore. We just want to make sure you're safe and taken care of." Derek's wife Laura was more direct in her approach. "Vincent, have you thought about what would happen to this house if something happened to you? Wouldn't it be better to make some arrangements now, while you're still able to make good decisions?" These conversations always left me feeling uneasy, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. Derek and Laura seemed genuinely concerned, and, as my closest living relatives, wasn't it natural for them to worry about my welfare? The pattern escalated when Derek suggested I might benefit from some help managing my finances. "Uncle Vinny, handling bills and investments can be complicated, especially when you're dealing with grief. I work in finance, and I'd be happy to help you organize your accounts and make sure everything is being handled properly." I'd been managing my own finances successfully for over 50 years, but Derek's offer seemed reasonable. Rose had always handled the bill paying in our household, and since her death, I'd been struggling with the paperwork and trying to understand all the statements and documents that arrived in the mail. "What kind of help are you talking about, Derek?" "Just basic organization. We could set up a system where I review your monthly statements, help you pay bills on time, and make sure you're not missing anything important. I could even be added to your accounts as an authorized user, so if there's ever an emergency, I can help immediately." Laura nodded enthusiastically. "Derek helped my mother with the same thing when my father died. It gave her such peace of mind to know that someone was looking out for her interests. Against my better judgment, I agreed to let Derek help with basic financial organization. I added him as an authorized user on my checking account and gave him copies of my monthly statements so he could help me track expenses and ensure I wasn't forgetting anything important. At first, Derek's help seemed genuinely useful. He organized my bills, set up a filing system, and even caught a couple of duplicate charges that I might have missed. I felt grateful for his assistance and guilty about my earlier suspicions. But gradually, I began noticing changes that concerned me. Derek started questioning my spending habits, expressing disapproval when I bought things he considered unnecessary or extravagant. "Uncle Vinny, did you really need to spend $200 on groceries this week? That seems like a lot for one person." "Derek, I like to cook, and I buy quality ingredients. I can afford my grocery bills. I know you can afford them now, but you need to think about the future. What if you need expensive medical care? What if the house needs major repairs? You should be more conservative with your spending." He also began making suggestions about my living situation that felt more like pressure than advice. "Uncle Vinny, this house is really too big for one person. The maintenance costs alone must be eating up a significant portion of your income. Have you considered downsizing to something more manageable?" "Derek, this is my home. Rose and I built our life here. I understand the sentimental value, but you have to be practical. This house is your biggest asset, and it's not generating any income just sitting here. If you sold it and moved to a smaller place, you could invest the difference and have more financial security." These conversations began to feel less like family concern and more like real estate consultations. The first clear warning sign came when I discovered that Derek had been using my debit card for his own expenses. I noticed several charges on my monthly statement that I didn't recognize, gas stations I'd never visited, restaurants I'd never been to, purchases at stores I never shopped at. When I called Derek to ask about them, his explanation was casual and dismissive. "Oh, those are just times when I was running errands for you and I used your card instead of mine by mistake. I meant to pay you back, but I keep forgetting." "Don't worry about it, the amounts are small." But the amounts weren't small. Over 3 months, Derek had charged over $800 to my account for his own purchases. Derek, using my card without permission isn't helping me manage my finances. It's stealing. From me, Uncle Vinny, that's a harsh word. I'm family, and I'm doing you favors all the time. Sometimes the lines get blurred when you're helping someone as much as I'm helping you. That conversation revealed something troubling about Derek's attitude toward my money and his role in my life. He seemed to believe that his help entitled him to compensation, even if he took that compensation without asking. But the real betrayal began when Derek started pressuring me to make him the beneficiary of my life insurance policy and to add him to the deed of my house. "Uncle Vinny, we need to talk about estate planning. What happens to your assets if something happens to you? Right now, everything would go through probate, which is expensive and time-consuming. Derek, I have a will. Everything is handled, but wills can be contested, and probate takes months. If you add me to your accounts and your house deed, everything would transfer automatically. It would save the family thousands of dollars in legal fees." Laura supported Derek's pressure campaign with emotional appeals. "Vincent, Derek is the only family you have left who cares about you. Your other relatives live across the country and never call or visit. If something happens to you, Derek is the one who'll have to handle everything anyway. Wouldn't it be easier to make it official now?" I was uncomfortable with these suggestions, but I also felt guilty about my reluctance to trust Derek. He was my brother's son, my closest living relative, and he had been helping me with practical matters since Rose's death. Maybe I was being paranoid or ungrateful. But when Derek presented me with papers that would essentially give him control over my house and my finances, something inside me rebelled. "Derek, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not ready to sign over control of my assets to anyone." "Uncle Vinny, I'm not asking for control. I'm asking to be added as a co-owner, so I can help protect your interests. What's the difference? The difference is that I'd be able to make decisions about the house and your accounts if you became unable to make them yourself. And what if I disagree with your decisions? Derek's pause was telling. Well, we'd discuss any major decisions together, of course. But the legal documents Derek had prepared didn't require my ongoing consent for his decisions. Once I signed them, Derek would have equal ownership of my house and equal access to my accounts, with no requirement to consult me about how they were used. That's when I realized that Derek's help had been a carefully orchestrated campaign to gain control of my assets while I was vulnerable from grief and isolation. But I was more isolated than I realized, because I'd allowed Derek's involvement to replace the connections I might have built with my neighbors and community. I'd been so focused on family that I'd neglected to develop relationships with the people who lived around me and shared my daily environment. Everything changed when I met Mrs. Chen, who lived 3 doors down from me. I'd seen her working in her garden for years, but we'd never had more than polite waves across our driveways. The day after my confrontation with Derek about the ownership papers, I was struggling to carry heavy grocery bags from my car when Mrs. Chen approached me. "Mr. Romano, let me help you with those bags. They look heavy." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen, but I can manage." "I'm sure you can, but why should you struggle when I'm right here?" My grandmother always said that neighbors who don't help each other aren't really neighbors at all. Mrs. Chen, whose first name was Amy, helped me carry my groceries into the house. And when she saw the legal documents Derek had left scattered across my kitchen table, her expression grew concerned. "Mr. Romano, I don't mean to pry, but are those financial documents? Is someone asking you to sign papers about your house or your money?" "Yes, my nephew thinks I need help managing my affairs." Amy looked at the papers more closely, and her concern deepened. "Mr. Romano, I work as a paralegal for an elder law attorney. These documents would give your nephew complete control over your house and your accounts. Is that what you want?" "He says it's just to help protect my interests." "Mr. Romano, in my experience, documents like these are usually designed to protect someone's interests, but not necessarily the person signing them." That conversation was the beginning of a relationship that would transform my understanding of what family really means. Amy introduced me to her attorney, Maria Santos, who reviewed Derek's documents and confirmed my suspicions. "Mr. Romano, these papers would make your nephew a co-owner of your house and give him unrestricted access to your bank accounts. If you signed these, he could sell your house or empty your accounts without your permission, and there would be very little you could do about it legally. But he's family. He says he just wants to help." "Mr. Romano, I see situations like this frequently. Family members who are genuinely trying to help don't usually ask for this level of control over someone's assets. They help with day-to-day management, while leaving ownership and decision-making authority with the person they're helping." Maria helped me understand that Derek's behavior fit a pattern of financial elder abuse that often comes from family members who see their elderly relatives' assets as early inheritance opportunities rather than resources that belong to the elderly person for their own care and comfort. But Maria also introduced me to something I'd never experienced: a community of people who cared about my well-being without wanting anything in return. Through Amy and Maria, I met several other neighbors who'd been watching Derek's frequent visits to my house with concern. "Mr. Romano, we weren't sure if we should say anything," said my next-door neighbor, Tom Bradley, "but that nephew of yours has been asking questions about your house, what it's worth, whether you have other family, how long you've lived here. Asked me the same questions, added Sarah Johnson, who lived across the street. I thought it was strange that he seemed more interested in your property than in how you were doing after your wife's death. These neighbors had been looking out for me without my knowledge, noticing patterns in Derek's behavior that I'd been too close to see clearly. But more importantly, they began including me in their lives in ways that Derek never had. Despite all his talk about family responsibility, Tom invited me to join the neighborhood's weekly poker game, which had been meeting in his garage every Thursday night for over 10 years. Vincent, we've been seeing you work in your garden for years, and we always figured you might enjoy some company. We play for quarters, tell terrible jokes, and solve all the world's problems between hands. Sarah asked if I'd be interested in helping with the community garden she was organizing in the vacant lot at the end of our street. Vincent, Rose always had the most beautiful flowers on the block. I bet you know more about gardening than the rest of us combined. Amy invited me to join her family for Sunday dinners, where I met her children and grandchildren and became honorary Uncle Vincent to 3 generations of people who appreciated my stories and valued my advice. For the first time since Rose's death, I felt connected to a community of people who seemed to enjoy my company rather than just tolerate it as a family obligation. Meanwhile, Derek's reaction to my refusal to sign his documents revealed his true motivations. Uncle Vinny, you're making a huge mistake. I'm the only family you have left, and you're rejecting my help because some strangers told you to be suspicious. Derek, they're not strangers anymore. They're friends, and they're not asking me to sign over my house to them. That's because they don't care about you the way family does. They don't have any responsibility for your well-being. Neither do you, Derek. Being related to me doesn't make you responsible for my well-being. It just makes you my nephew. Uncle Vinny, when something happens to you, and it will happen, these neighbors aren't going to take care of you. They're not going to pay your medical bills, or handle your funeral arrangements, or deal with your estate. That's going to fall on me, because I'm family. Derek, if you're only interested in my well-being because you think you'll inherit my assets, then you're not family. You're just a vulture with a familiar last name. That conversation ended my relationship with Derek, but it marked the beginning of the richest period of my life since Rose's death. My new community didn't just include me in their activities. They created new traditions that honored my presence and made me feel valued rather than tolerated. The poker group started meeting at my house every other week, because Tom said my kitchen table was more comfortable than his garage workbench. Sarah made me the official advisor for the community garden, seeking my input on everything from soil preparation to pest control. Amy's family began celebrating my birthday with the same enthusiasm they showed for blood relatives, complete with homemade cake and thoughtful gifts. But the most meaningful change was that these people cared about my daily life, my health, my happiness, and my opinions in ways that Derek never had. Despite all his claims about family responsibility, when I had a minor fall while trimming hedges, Tom was at my door within minutes because he'd seen the incident from his yard. When I mentioned feeling lonely on Rose's birthday, Sarah organized a neighborhood potluck dinner so I wouldn't spend that difficult day alone. When I worried about some suspicious phone calls from people claiming to need my social security number, Amy connected me with resources to protect myself from scams. This community provided emotional support, practical assistance, and genuine companionship without asking for anything in return except my participation and friendship. Vincent, you've become such an important part of our neighborhood, Amy told me one evening as we sat on my porch watching her grandchildren play in the yard. I can't imagine this place without you. Amy, I can't imagine my life without all of you. I spent so much time worrying about family obligations that I forgot to build family relationships. What's the difference? Family obligations are about duty and guilt and who owes what to whom. Family relationships are about love and support and choosing to be there for each other because you want to, not because you have to. 6 months after Derek's attempt to gain control of my assets, he made one final effort to exploit our family connection. He called to tell me that he was facing financial difficulties and needed a loan to avoid losing his house. Uncle Vinny, I know we had some disagreements about your finances, but I'm family, and family helps family. I need to borrow $25,000 to catch up on my mortgage payments. Derek, why should I lend you money when you tried to steal my house? I wasn't trying to steal anything. I was trying to help you organize your affairs by giving yourself control over my assets. Uncle Vinny, that's ancient history. Right now, I need help, and you're the only family I have who can provide it. Derek, if I was the only family you had, you wouldn't have spent months trying to manipulate me into signing over my property. You would have spent time getting to know me, caring about my well-being, and building a relationship based on love rather than money. So, you're going to let your own nephew lose his house. Derek, I'm going to let my nephew face the consequences of his own financial decisions, just like I had to face the consequences of trusting someone who saw me as an opportunity rather than a person. I didn't lend Derek the money, and I never heard from him again. But that final conversation confirmed that I'd made the right choice in refusing to give him control over my assets and my life. A year later, when I had to have surgery for a hernia repair, my chosen family demonstrated what real family support looks like. Tom took time off work to drive me to the hospital and stayed with me until I was admitted. Sarah organized a meal schedule so I'd have home-cooked dinners delivered every day during my recovery. Amy's daughter, a nurse, stopped by twice daily to check on my incision and make sure I was following doctor's orders. Amy's grandchildren made get-well cards and visited regularly to keep me entertained during my convalescence. You know, Vincent, Tom said, as he helped me navigate the hospital's pre-surgical paperwork, I've never seen family members take better care of each other than we're taking care of you. Tom, the thing about chosen family is that everyone chooses to be there. There's no guilt, no obligation, no hidden agenda. Everyone's there because they want to be. That sounds like the way family should work. That's exactly how family should work. During my recovery, I had time to reflect on the difference between the family I was born into and the family I'd chosen to build. Derek had claimed family responsibility for me, but what he'd really claimed was ownership rights. He'd wanted to control my decisions, my assets, and my living situation because he believed being my nephew gave him authority over my life. My chosen family had taken on responsibility for my well-being, but they'd done it while respecting my autonomy, my decisions, and my right to live my life according to my own values and preferences. Derek had seen my value in terms of what I could provide him: my house, my money, my inheritance. My chosen family saw my value in terms of what I could contribute to their lives: my experience, my stories, my friendship, my participation in their community. Derek had tolerated my presence because family obligations required it. My chosen family celebrated my presence because they genuinely enjoyed my company. 2 years after my surgery, I made a decision that would have shocked Derek but seemed natural to my chosen family. I rewrote my will to reflect the reality of who had actually functioned as my family. I left modest bequests to Derek and my other blood relatives, enough to acknowledge our genetic connection but not enough to make my death financially beneficial to them, that the bulk of my estate went to establishing a foundation that would support community garden programs, neighborhood beautification projects, and services for isolated elderly people, causes that reflected the values and interests of the people who had become my real family. But most importantly, I made Amy and Tom the executors of my estate and the people responsible for making medical decisions if I became unable to make them myself. "Vincent, are you sure about this?" Amy asked when I told her about the will changes. "We're not your blood relatives, Amy. You're something better than blood relatives. You're people who chose to love me without expecting anything in return except friendship. You're people who proved that family is about commitment and caring, not genetics and guilt. What if your nephew objects to these arrangements? Let him object. He had his chance to be family, and he chose to be a predator instead. I'm not going to reward that choice by leaving him my assets or giving him authority over my care. Today, at 80 years old, I'm healthier, happier, and more secure than I've been since Rose died. I live in the same house Derek tried to manipulate me into signing over to him, but now it's the gathering place for a chosen family that values my presence and respects my autonomy. We have weekly poker games where I've become the undisputed champion of terrible jokes. We maintain a community garden that produces vegetables for the local food bank. We organize neighborhood events that bring people together and prevent the kind of isolation that made me vulnerable to Derek's manipulation. Most importantly, I'm surrounded by people who see me as valuable for who I am rather than what I own, who support my independence rather than trying to control my decisions, and who choose to be in my life because they want to be, rather than because they feel obligated. Derek was right about one thing: when something happens to me, my chosen family will be the ones who handle my funeral arrangements and deal with my estate, but they'll do it because they love me and want to honor my memory, not because they're hoping to profit from my death. The blood that betrayed me taught me that sharing DNA doesn't guarantee love, loyalty, or genuine care. But the family I found where I least expected it taught me that choosing to love someone, choosing to support them, and choosing to include them in your life is far more powerful than any genetic connection. Sometimes the most important family members are the ones who choose you rather than the ones you're born with. And sometimes the greatest blessing of aging is learning the difference between people who tolerate your existence and people who celebrate your presence. My blood betrayed me, but my chosen family saved me. And that's a lesson worth sharing with anyone who's ever felt alone in a room full of relatives, or anyone who's ever wondered if real family is about biology or love. The answer is love. It's always love. Have you ever found family in unexpected places? Do you believe blood relationships guarantee loyalty and care? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Sometimes the most important family members are the ones who choose to love you rather than the ones who are obligated to. If this story made you think about the difference between biological family and chosen family, please subscribe for more stories about community, belonging, and finding love in unexpected places. From what city are you watching today?